Let's read. All right, hi everybody, here we are. We start today the Jubilee Design Lecture Series, Spring 25. You're very lucky because this semester we organized those lectures focused on Rome in the Jubilee year. You are in this very important period for the city of Rome. There's a lot of transformations going on. And we invited 4 important representatives of the major transformations currently taking place in our fantastic city. We start today with our first lecture, which is going to be given by Via Ingegneria Studio. And the lecture is entitled Piazza Pia, Rome, Italy 2025. In the beginning, there was a spotlight. Well, the studio is based in Rome, founded about 40 years ago, and it operates in the field of infrastructure, including trade and railway systems, metro and passenger terminals, maritime works, architecture and urban projects, hydraulic engineering, bridges, viaduct, tunnels, and underground structures, as well as multi-level parking facilities. The studio counts around 60 employees. Correct me if I'm wrong, I counted about 60. The Ingegneria is famous because they are actually now realizing this very important project in Rome, but for also many other projects, such as for the Metro C in Rome, and especially the station Fori Imperiali and San Giovanni. All right, so the lecture, it's all about an introduction given by engineer Francesco Nicchiarelli. He will explore the transition from a purely engineering perspective to an integrated approach to urban design, highlighting the gradual dissolution of boundaries in architecture and engineering. Then it will be the moment of Matteo Di Girolamo. He delves into the engineering challenges and their intrinsic connection to urban designing, shedding light on interdependencies, sorry, this work is very difficult for me, between these 2 disciplinary fields. And then architect Felipe Lozano Lalinde, sorry if the pronunciation is not the best, and he will focus on the significance of attentive design, emphasizing an ongoing dialogue with the great masters of the past. The discussion centers on architectural forms and their relationship with history, fostering a design process that values the context and its stratification. All right, so it is the moment of Francesco Nicchiarelli, and thanks to all of you for accepting this invitation. We're very proud of having you here. Thanks a lot. So Francesco, it's your moment. All right, yes, sure. We start with a short video about the construction side of the project. So Fabio, if you could please let it go.
Good morning, everybody. Okay. Good morning. My name is Francesco Nicchiarelli. I'm the one of the founding partners of Via Ingegneria, the firm that we already know developed the project we are talking about today. I'm here today just to introduce you the two key designers of this project, Matteo Di Girolamo, the engineer, and Felipe Lozano, the architect. But I would like to shortly focus on one of the specific aspects of this assignment, team integration. To begin with, I think it would be fair to say that the dome you see in this picture on the background is not designed by us. It is actually designed by Michelangelo Buonarroti, or how you would say Michelangelo Buonarroti. Or now you perfectly know that this is a joke, but it's done to explain that the question here, the meaningful thing we had to cope with is very connected to the surroundings. In fact, many elements that you see around the square were already there when we arrived, and they were built during the centuries, and they belong to the history of Rome. But this air of the city was what we called a known place. It was, yes, surrounded by monuments and masterpieces of architecture, but it was what we call a known place. What we mean with a known place, we mean a place without a real identity. Before, in this site, till 2023, there was a street traveled by about 50,000 up to 30,000 vehicles, crossing the stoplight you see here, because the stoplight was the one who had to provide the passage of about 10 to 50,000 pedestrians going to St. Peter. In the special days of religious events, they can reach really 50,000 people. So our project originated from here, from the need to solve an endemic traffic jam and to speed up the car traffic. As you see, this is the crossing between the two lines. It was all on the surface, and the idea was to put the car vehicles underground to avoid a traffic jam. Back in 1998, during the preparation of Jubilee 2000, an attempt was made to build the tunnel, allowing the flow of traffic to pass under the area of Castel Sant'Angelo and Via della Conciliazione. But it was impossible because of too many obstacles underground. In 2022, when we were approached by the City of Rome and the Jubilee Government Agency, they asked us to try again to solve the engineering problem. We presented a solution. They gave us a green light you are going to see. But the idea of a new available surface in these incredible surroundings was not being discussed yet. The project came with an initial hypothesis, as you can see in the drawing here, of underpassing the axis of Via della Conciliazione, leaving the next section toward the Lungotevere in Sassia uncovered with a sort of vacuum, a trench. But we came with another proposal. The proposal was to cover the tunnel, creating a continuous pedestrian area. Our proposal was enthusiastically adopted by the mayor of Rome and created a completely new perspective. We had now a huge, shapeless, empty surface surrounded by beautiful monuments. You can see it on the picture. Around this, we had the Tiber walls, the Emperor's Mole Adriana, the renovated in the 14th and 15th century by an architect called Sangallo and transformed into Castel Sant'Angelo. This is the Mole Adriana, this one. You can see under you have the Mole up, on the upper part you have the castle. And the buildings in front of the square had been built in 1929. So what happened is that no one had faced the issue of how to arrange this huge surface yet. And initially, we were told by the authorities that they were thinking of a separate assignment to design the square. 2 projects, 2 teams. We didn't agree. So we made the point that the project should be looked and considered as a whole from one single perspective. And we should be the ones to design it in its entirety by the same team. The Ingegneria started 40 years ago with a focus on transportation infrastructure, but just doing that, we organically developed an expertise, a strong expertise in architecture. And so I go back to my initial point, which is the critical issue in our line of business, the integration of disciplines. We believe that the need of integration is proportional to the complexity of the project. And particularly this project was probably the most complex we had ever faced. The architectural design, in this case more than in other, was strictly connected with all the other strategical issues. The hydraulic underground issue, the archaeological issue, you may see what we found during the construction, the road layout, the specific geotechnical and construction problem related to the buildings, the historical buildings of 1929, the short time left for construction, and the last but not least, the economical issue, given that we had to be on budget. All these issues needed to be solved in the same team and convincingly discussed with the stakeholders in order to get their approval. The main stakeholders were the Tiber Authority, ACEA, which is the sewage authority, the Ministry of Archaeological and Monumental and Architectural Heritage, the Vatican, the City of Rome, the Italian government, and many others. There were 25 at the conference. Now our client had a tough decision to make under pressure and with a construction sign to be open in the middle of the city center. In short, this is what we told them. One of our partners, the one who's going to talk to you soon, is an excellent architect. And of course, he has an amazing team of over 20 people in our company. And now Matteo Di Girolamo will tell you the rest of the story from his engineering perspective, but followed by Felipe Rozzano, the architect, who will tell you his side of the story, probably the one you want to listen more.
Good morning. Morning to everybody. I'm going to start the most boring part of the intervention. I'm sorry, because I'm an engineer, and so I think you are not so much interested in this kind of problems, but I think it's maybe yes. I think it's important to understand the relation between what is what you can see and what you cannot see. Just to give you some data about this, some facts. The cost of all the intervention was about 55 million euros. The cost of what you see, the cost of the square is 5 million euros, more or less, or something like 7 million euros. Everything else is just down the the road, no? So this is just to understand, just to understand what kind of problem you have to face when you have a project like this. So I would like just to explain in a few words what kind of problems. So when I was first invited by the Rome municipality, and they asked me to assess the feasibility of the intervention, I welcomed this request also because I still didn't know what it would be facing. In fact, after about 1 or 2 months spent studying the papers on the underground presences, I made the discovery I would never have desired to make. Under the road, there was, because not anymore, I mean, there were flowing the 2 largest sewer collectors in the city of Rome. There are collectors that collect all the stormwater of the city and the catchment area of about 800,000 inhabitants. So all the north part of Rome is passing, all the water from the north part of Rome pass through this place. So naturally, it's impossible to interrupt the service even for 1 minute, you can understand. And on the basis of this discovery, I went back. I was quite happy, I mean, because I went back to the municipality and I said, okay, the project is not feasible. Okay, so we were joking, let's go. And the reason why previously the underpass was stopped before crossing Via della Conciliazione in 1998 was exactly this. The project is not feasible. I mean, the answer from the municipality was, we called you because we think you will find a solution and you have to find it. I mean, no way, you have to find it. So in these cases, and you are very young, all of you are very young, so I think you will have a very long professional life, and so you will face a lot of situations, very difficult and so on. And sometimes it often happens, not often, not always, but often. In these cases, you think, how can I do? Okay, I have to do, but I don't know absolutely how can I do, but I have to do. So I still start thinking and thinking and thinking, and I started to think an idea that it seems a little bit insane, but perhaps also the only one possible. So I think maybe, I don't know why no one thought about this, but anyway, I can try. I thought if I use one of the 2 collectors, now one of the 2 collectors is, these are the 2 collectors. And just to understand the proportions, this is a person. The collector is more or less 4.5 meters high, 3 meters wide. So if I use one of the 2 collectors to carry all the flow with the second collector, I could demolish one of them at a time and build a third larger one to collect the flow from both of them. The doubt was, will one collector be able to carry the flow rate of 2 without going into crisis? At this point, I started a rather complex calculations, follow to see if during the duration of the construction this was acceptable and what risks were involved in making this choice. Of course, you can understand that you cannot make any, I mean, there is no chance to fail. So the idea could work. But there was a small problem. Since the 2 collectors were at different levels, as you can see there, it would be necessary to pump water from one to the other one. And we are talking, just to make an idea, of about 10 cubic meters per second. That is a number maybe you cannot realize how big is it, but it's just for understand. It's like if you have to full a 50 meters long Olympic pool in 1 minute or 2 minutes at least. So this is a very huge quantity of water, and no one, of course, in the middle of the city, as you see, in a place that is not usually used for this. The idea was at the date no one was able to assemble such a temporary system, so it was necessary to arrange for the system and to deliver from all the Europe, because every pump like this that you see, there were 10 pumps like this. In Italy, there wasn't available, maybe 1 or 2. So from all Europe, we collect pumps, we assemble together, we send, we deliver with something like 25 trucks from all the part of Europe, and we start assembling. Here you can see the plant, part of the plant, almost assembled. And then we start to try if it worked, because we thought it would work, but we were not sure about this. And so once this task was completed, the more complex work was completed too. And we could move to the construction of the underpass and the square. The next, you can, forse l'altro, ecco, here you can see the new collectors, and more or less you can understand also the size. The new collector is something like 8 meters wide, 5 meters 8. And here is where we are. We are just aside the wall and just in front of Castel Sant'Angelo. And so this is more or less the story. And now the most pleasant part of the intervention is from Felipe Lozano. Last but not least, I think you are obliged from your assistant to visit, of course. Okay, okay. So.
So, thank you for attending this lecture. And okay. Yeah. Let me see if I know how does this work. Okay. Okay, I get it. So again, thank you very much for attending the lecture, and I'm very pleased to share this extraordinary experience we all share. My name is Felipe Lozano. I'm architect of our engineer and architectural firm. I work since the beginning of the 2000 with my colleagues. And well, first of all, I want to apologize for my English because it's many years since I haven't spoken it. So I will try to make my best. And well, it's important to say that for us, for all of us, working and living in Rome, it has been an extraordinary chance to be involved in this project, and at the same time, a great responsibility. Because it's needless to say which is the importance that the area presents from historical, architectural, and also because it's one of the most frequented areas of the city. There is almost no visitor that comes to Rome that does not pass through this area. So, I mean, we were somehow our task was somehow simplified because we did have a very short amount of time to deal with the project, because everything happened quite quickly, and there was a timeline with a deadline at the end of 2024, because as you know, on the 25th of December 2024, the Jubilee year began, and for that date, everything had to be completed. So, I mean, that was quite a chance. I would like also, as a kind of premise, to underline the importance of having worked in a multidisciplinary team. I really believe that, at least for me as an architect, having worked with my colleagues, engineers, structural, hydraulical, and so forth, has been an opportunity to face the different issues we were facing during the design stage, in order to find solution in a, I hope, in a more integrated way. This is the kind of approach that we try to implement in all our designs. So, after this introduction, I think that, of course, I'm going to talk about the urban design issues. And it's necessary, in my opinion, to give some idea about the urban development, how the city has grown, how it, and which are the changes that this part of the city has suffered during the centuries. And I think that independently from our project, the changes that this part of the city has suffered is a very interesting theme to be studied. I will try to give you some idea, but shortly, because it's late. This is how the square, Piazza Pia, was presenting previously to the new project. So you can see the entrance to the tunnel that was built in the late 90s, and the two buildings at the beginning of Via della Conciliazione, that, as I will explain, and that, as I will explain later, were built in the 50s. So actually they are relatively modern buildings, if compared with Adrian's Mausoleum, for example. Adrian's Mausoleum, which is here in the bottom part of the picture. And you see the traffic junction. And another interesting element, as I will explain to you later, is the retaining wall that you can see there, creating a cut between the surface of the square and the river, and the sidewalk that goes close to the river wall. But we will take about that later. Briefly, I would like to show you some images of Rome cartography. Fortunately, Rome is a city that has been portrayed many times during the centuries, leaving aside ancient Rome, of which I think there is no representation. It has been represented later, but there is a very beautiful ancient Rome map, which is called Forma Urbis, that you can see. It's in the Celio, but it does not reach this part. So, I mean, it's hypothetical how the city was in Roman times. Instead, Instead, since the 16th century, many designers, many architects have portrayed the city. So we can see how this area was at that time. And what we can say is that that part of the area had an urban fabric that was consolidated since the 16th and 17th century. And there was a very important plot in this part, which is the pilgrims' pathway. As you know, I don't know if I can, there is a sign on here. Okay, yes. So this is Ponte Sant'Angelo Bridge, that links this part of the, oops, sorry. Okay. And it was the bridge that, since the first Jubilee year at the beginning of the 14th century, when it was for the first time held in Rome by Pope Boniface VIII, that was used for pilgrims to cross the river, and then turning west, going to St. Peter Basilica. So this is a very historical, consolidated pathway that has remained almost unchanged until the end of the 19th century. And I can say that one of the main aims from the urban design point of view was to reestablish that urban hierarchy that has been somehow compromised during the 20th century, mainly because of the increasing pressure of road traffic. Okay. So here, there are two elements that I think are fundamental in order to understand our job. The urban fabric on the one hand, and the Tiber River on the other hand. And this is why I have inserted this image. This is a very beautiful picture by Caspar van Vittel, who was a painter in the late 17th century and early 18th century. He has made many views of Rome, which are extremely useful for us who work in the city of Rome in order to understand how it was centuries ago. Okay, here we have another couple of maps. From Tempesta at the middle of the 17th century, and from Falda, and all of them portray the same thing. You know, it is interesting to note about the importance of this pathway, that it was so important that it conditioned the bastions of Castel Sant'Angelo that were built earlier in the 16th century. As you see, this 5-point star of the second line of bastions, this particular one was cut in order to allow pilgrims to move from the bridge towards St. Peter. Okay? This is another view, quite interesting in my opinion, in which you can see from east towards west and towards St. Peter, how it was the area. We are not talking about the central part of the area. This area actually was in the fringe, okay? Behind Castel Sant'Angelo, there were fields. It was not built. It was built just at the end of the 19th century, to give you an idea. And this is already from the 18th century. It's a very famous map, a wonderful map that I would suggest you to study, because it's fantastic from a graphic and from the documentary point of view. This is the Noli plan of Rome of 1748. And here you can see, as I was saying, the main path that was through this road, which was called Via di Borgo Nuovo. And from there was other two roads, Via di Borgo Vecchio and Via di Borgo di Santo Spirito. It's interesting to see these roads, because they do not longer exist, as maybe you already know if you have hung around the area or you have read something, because they have been completely knocked down at the beginning of the 20th century. Okay, so everything was more or less consolidated until the turning of the century, between the 19th and 20th century, when I can say that it's quite clear that dramatic changes happened in Rome when it became capital city of the Italian state. You know that until 1870, Rome, nevertheless, the Italian state had already been established in 1861. Rome remained under the rule of the church until 1870, in which it was taken by Italian troops, and it became the capital city. So major refurbishment, urban refurbishment works were taken in order to modernize the city that until that time has remained almost as an anti-modern city. And it was one of the few in Europe that had remained. For example, take into account that Rome, being a big city, is one of the, I think, one of the few capital cities that still have the the defensive walls that in the meantime in other cities such as Vienna or Paris had been completely knocked down in order to enlarge the city. But that's what not the political program of the church ruling the city. This changed after 1870. Major works were conveyed. One of them had to do, for example, with I don't know if you can say it, so with changing the shape of the river. Also for sanitary and hydraulical reasons. The Tiber was quite a changing in level river, so it produced many floods in the city center. So major works of creating retaining walls were done, and that that's a consequence of that. For example, part of the bastions of Castel Sant'Angelo were knocked down. Just to give you an idea of what's the situation how the place in which we are called to work has suffered many changes in the course of centuries, and in our opinion is fundamental to acknowledge that progressive changes. Okay. This is, for example, a couple of images of the works of the new walls of the River Tevere that were built since 1875. It was one of the first works that were carried out in the Roma's capital city. And they are important because from an engineering point of view, we have had some interferences with these walls, as my colleagues engineers know. This is interesting as well because these are images of the 20s. And as you can see, other transformations that were even funny, if I can say, funny from a certain point of view. These are the moat. These are the moat of the external defensive walls of Castel Sant'Angelo. But I mean, if you see the two images, which one would you think is the older one? The one in the left or the one in the right? In the left, you don't see the moat. In the right, you see it. Well, curiously, the older one is this one, because at a certain point, the moat had been fulfilled. Okay, there was no need for that element. Later on in the 30s, in a program that was quite typical of those years, of trying to reestablish a character of antiquity of these monuments. They were digging, again, I don't know if it's correct, the term, in order to create a garden, which is the one that you see today. We found these images while we were working, and we were, at the beginning, we were quite confused about them. It's important to say that the architect that was in charge of this design was Attilio Spaccarelli, which is one of the two architects that later had to do with one of the major interventions, the major project that is fundamental to understand how the area looks today. This is Via della Conciliazione. I mean, Via della Conciliazione is extremely interesting project in my point of view. Is as interesting as it has been criticized. It's a very, I mean, it's hard to say whether it's a good or bad urban project. Maybe on the other hand, it's useless to give an opinion. It is. I mean, the form the city has today has to do with the demolition process that was undertaken in the 30s in order to create the perspective that from Castel Sant'Angelo was facing St. Peter's. Because until that time, it is important to say that if you see the old pictures of Rome, okay, this is quite interesting in my opinion. If you see the four images from 1 to 4, you see the knocking down process that was taken in just 1 year from 1936 to 1937. So this project was approved by Mussolini, designed by architects Spaccarelli and Piacentini. Marcello Piacentini, if you do not know him, was one of the most important architects of fascism, of the fascist era. He has built dozens of buildings throughout all Italy. And in this case, he made this intervention, taking into account that in order to create this new avenue, Via della Conciliazione, I don't know the translation, it could be the Conciliation Avenue, maybe. The name is not casual. It tends to underline the agreement between the Italian state and the church that were signed in 1929. Because until that time, after the 1870 relationship between church and the Italian state had not been so great, as you can imagine. And then this changed in 1929, and this road had somehow to celebrate this new agreement. So in just 1 year, they demolished a third of the whole district called I Borghi, moving aside 5,000 people. So, I mean, you can imagine that there are many elements that of this project that can be criticized, and it has been harshly criticized in the 50s in literature. If you see comments by people like Antonio Cederna or Italo Insolera or Leonardo Benevolo, which are the main figures of the Roman architectural culture in the second part of the century, they very much criticize this work. But again, on the other hand, it's what it is. I mean, the time cannot be. Here on the left, you can see upwards the demolition process, and downwards the area before. It is important, and I don't know if I am going outside of the theme, which was supposed to be explaining the Piazza Pia. But on the other hand, it's true that for us as an architect, sometimes exploring the context in which you are asked to work is as important and maybe sometimes even funnier than the work itself. I mean, discovering how things have happened and which are the reasons why the urban form is as it is, in my opinion, extremely interesting. Okay, so, just one thing, sorry. Take into account that we are now used to consider the St. Peter Basilica perspective as a given date. It's something that belongs to the imaginary of Rome, but it was not this way until 50 years ago, 70 years ago. Previously, the effect was exactly the opposite. St. Peter's Basilica and St. Peter Square were almost hidden from the rest of the city. So there was a surprise effect when you arrived to the square, passing through the small alleyways and roads that were before, okay? This is something that I think is missing. It's an experience that cannot be experimented. So, well, okay, I have made this historical background, which maybe has become a bit broader than I was wanting, but I think it was useful. And now let's talk about the project. For sure, the project had a main aim, which was to pedestrianize the central area, eliminating the traffic junction, in order to allow and to foster the pedestrian flow towards St. Peter. But on the other hand, since the first moment, thought that just pedestrianizing the area through the extension of the existing road gallery was not enough in order to obtain a quality urban space, an urban space with enough quality. So we made an analysis of which were the other deficiencies the area presented to this date. And, well, for example, a thing that we thought that could be improved was the relationship between the area and the river. This relationship was almost neglected in the previous state. As you can see in this picture here, there was a retaining wall that, as I was saying, I was talking about it at the beginning of the lecture, that separated the sidewalk close to the Tiber wall from the rest of the square. So once you were descending from Casa Sant'Angelo to the central area, river tend to fade, and you were not able to reach it again. There were two completely separated entities. So we thought that that had to be improved, and that has become maybe one of the main elements in defining the urban design project. Of course, another element that can be rejoined was the piazza, the central core of the square, with the gardens in the old mode of Sant'Angelo. In this case also happened that staying here, you were not able to go to this green area. So on the other hand, this area was almost abandoned, and that was a pity, because on the other hand, it's quite interesting. So we thought that this had to be strengthened, this relationship. Finally, there was this area here that was to be completely rethought, because it was occupied previously by the entrance of the old gallery. So there was a new surface that had to be thought. And here, it cannot be seen in this picture, but I will show you later. There is a small church, quite interesting, even if it's a fake, I have to say, in the sense that it's a church that it's a 18th century church, extremely interesting, but it's not placed in its original place. Actually, the church had been demolished and rebuilt during the works of Via della Conciliazione, because in that time they had no problem in doing this kind of things. I mean, they talk about moving palaces. Of course, they were not moving anything. They were just knocking down and rebuilding. But I mean, the concept was that. And in Via della Conciliazione, there are many old palaces that you will see. But actually, they have been completely rebuilt in order to be alienated with the new facades of the street. So these are the main elements I was talking to you about. This object. So we focus on how to achieve these objectives. And here you can see an image of the preliminary design that shows how we try to accomplish those objectives. In the case of the relationship with the river, we thought that the retaining wall had to be completely rethought. And we substitute the wall with a gently slope built as a series of steps in a very typical Roman tradition. When actually let's make me, a parenthesis. We, from the very first beginning, we put ourselves the problem of which was the architectural character we wanted to give to the project. Because this is quite a delicate area in which you are under the eyes of many people, many authorities. And so, okay, again, how to deal with the forms? I have to say that we decided to work in a very silent way, if I can speak this way. I mean, not in order to create a new element that on itself represents a novel sense of novelty or whatever. We were more interested in reinforcing the relationships between the elements that already existed in the area. The river, the mausoleum, Adrian's mausoleum, St. Peter at the end, and the church I was talking to you before. So in this case, we design, so we try to work with very typical Roman elements, okay? Such as, for example, these gently sloped steps that you can see in places such as Campidoglio or in the surroundings of Piazza di Spagna, just in order to give you the idea of, I mean, which were the reality with which we were measuring ourselves. This is an image of the 3D model we made. We built a model, a 3D model that was quite funny, that went from Castel Sant'Angelo to St. Peter. And we extracted the designs, the drawings from that model. And this, of course, this is this is not in perspective. This is a section, a cross section in orthogonal view. So the first time we saw this image, we thought that we had made a mistake, that it was not possible, that there was something wrong because it was too big. And you know, yeah, of course, in the normal day, you don't see this way because the perspective effect tends to decrease the size of St. Peter. But if you see it in real dimension, the relationship between masses is exactly this. We later made some measures in order to verify if our model was correct, and in fact, it was correct. So this gives you the idea of what we're talking about, and which are the masses with which we have to work. This is just in order to emphasize the silence we wanted to achieve. It was not the point of creating the risk of making something completely out of the point was too big, in my opinion. Of course, on the other hand, the project has been by someone criticized for not being so courageous from the urban form point of view. I think it's okay. I mean, I assume that critic. And here you can see some other pictures that we extracted from our model. The model was really interesting. I mean, I don't want to focus that much on this, but it was a model that had either the urban design, the surface project, and also the undercover structures, which were fundamental because we have to deal with conciliating both of them. And I will show you some other image later. For example, this one. So this is an image showing that element I was saying to you, this curve with this. Of course, the geometry of the stairs assumes the line, the curved line of the Tiber, and then just by offsetting this line creates these stairs that become bigger at the center part of the square because that's where the square reaches its lower level. And then it goes up to one side and to the other. In a similar way, we try to enhance the relationship between the new pedestrian area over here with the church I was talking to you before, creating a new stair in order to give bigger visibility to the facade of the church. I will show you some renders later on. And then finally, we try to work in reestablishing or improving the relationship between the square and the gardens, which are signed by some pedestrian paths. This is an area that if you will see, I think in a few weeks it will be finished, but it has suffered different changes because of, mostly because of technical spaces that have been built underneath the soil level and then have provoked the area to change a bit if referred to this design. And well, as I was saying to you, this is just a couple of images of the details. As I was saying to you before, we try to do everything in the most discreet way, using typical elements of the city of Rome. You know, Rome is a city in which you have to work with a certain care, in which everybody says his own opinion, and at first novelties are not particularly well received, let's put it in this way. So again, we used volcanic stone, which is very typical of the center of Rome, that black stone that you can see almost everywhere in the Rome. The urban furniture, curbs, and so forth were made in travertine marble, which is very typical of the city. We had quite a few discussions about this issue because actually we wanted to use granite, which is also quite typical of the city in Rome. But at the end, talking with the Soprintendenza, this I cannot translate this. Let's say that it is the authority that deals with the cultural heritage. So they imposed travertine. And then we arrived to the images of the square. Actually, in these renders, there is still the granite. One last question I could talk to you something about is the fountains, which is one of the funniest parts of the project, in my opinion. I don't think that they are the real core of the project. I think that, for example, the steps that puts together the square and the river are a much more important element from the urban point of view, but nevertheless, the elements about which more has been discussed during the design phase was the fountains. Because, to be honest, the request for the fountains came from the mayor of Rome himself. He was particularly worried, and we shared that that issue about the livability of the square, because this is quite an important argument today, much more than it was maybe 30 years ago when I was studying architecture in Spain. You know, at the time it was quite typical to build up the so-called hard urban spaces. Okay, nowadays it's almost impossible. I mean, if you don't, in the first renders we made of this square, immediately the criticism arose about that there were not enough trees. The question of planting and of naturalizing urban places has become fundamental. But in this case, it was hard to operate as you could do in other places. Even in central places, I think, for example, in my city, Madrid, a new big square has been made in the city center, all full of trees, and also in Barcelona or Paris. But I don't think that was there was not a question to work in this way here. But again, everybody was quite worried about what is called the heat island. I don't know if it's said this way in English. Okay? But it has become a major issue in designing public spaces because of the increasing temperatures and so forth. So we try to deal both with the question of how to create livable spaces and at the same time preserving views and maintaining the integrity of the existing views and the existing monuments, not only St. Peter's, but also the couple of buildings that you see at the beginning of the Via della Conciliazione. And okay, so I mean, I think, so I was saying that when we were asked to make a fountain at the beginning, we placed a fountain at the middle of the square. We thought that it was quite typical because you see geometrically the shape, the perimeter of the square is quite undefined. So it was necessary we work with very clear geometries in order to establish a hierarchy. But then the Vatican representatives were completely against the idea of a fountain in the middle because they were afraid that somehow that could have some kind of negative impact in the flow of pedestrians from the bridge to St. Peter. So we made different attempts in order to conciliate these issues. And at the end, we finished defining these two fountains that you see here. So I give you some images of the design stage renders that were used to illustrate the project and that obtain the null host and from different subjects. This is the church I was talking to you before, and the new stairs, the new steps that create a new relationship. Take into account that before the project, this church was almost completely hidden because of some trees that were here. And I think I have finished. Just to give you these ideas of how we try to position fountains, measuring the spare space in the middle, but also the dimension of the fountains. We put ourselves the problem of which was the correct dimension of the fountains, taking into account the space in which we were working, and at the end we finished with this solution. And that's it. So I think I finished. Thank you very much.
All right. It works? Fabio, does it work? Fabio? Microfono? No, ecco, yes. Oh, great. It was a very, very, very interesting lecture. Thanks, everybody. It was really, from my point of view, really amazing. Also, this last part about the historical development and the reason why you came up to the design solutions was very, very interesting. And this is actually how our students, they operate. Many studios are dealing with public space design. We observed the city the way you were describing, so it was really, really, really good. Okay, guys, so now it is a moment in which we usually spend a little bit of time debating about the lecture you just heard. I collected a number of the questions that you guys submitted to the online form. And I will now read those questions. Sorry, I need my glasses, otherwise I cannot see. While waiting for the questions, I have a question myself. And the question is all about, while digging so much below the ground, did you find any other archaeological remain? So yes, please. Can you tell us? Maybe if you can stand.
Yes. So your question is why so costly is the intervention? We found also archaeological, yes, of course. You have seen, I think you have seen, there was a picture about this. There was an ancient villa and a lavatory. It's like this. And so they, in a very short time, they displaced it. And now at the moment is outside, it's near Rome. And we are planning to remove here, just aside, to find a place. This is this is a target of the new project there in the gardens. There should be an area where all the rest are placed again. Yes. Yes.
Actually, I was very curious about this.
È una tintoria.
I was actually, yes.
To wash the...
Yeah, I recognized the structures. I just didn't want to interrupt the lecture. And actually, there was really a question by a student about how you dealt with the archaeological remains that you found. Yeah. I also have another question for you. I know that the river embankments, they are pretty fragile and the soil is not really the best ever. And I'm just asking if you had to do some things with the river embankments or if you just didn't touch them.
No, we made a lot of, yes, we have a lot of problem with this. I mean, the river embankments. And we made a lot of analysis about this to check if it was possible to ensure the stability in any moments during the excavations. And everybody, here you can see how close is the new collector to the buildings. And so there was a very important historical analysis about the structures like this, you see here. But, so we made drills to check the quality of the wall and so on. And so after that, then also quite important analysis, also numerical analysis, 3D analysis, and so on, just to understand if it was possible to excavate like this. And so the results was okay, but it was not easy. That's why the cost of the project is mostly in this part of the, yes.
I'm sorry, students, but this is about my city, and so it's like I'm very much involved in this project. So, I mean, like emotionally, it's about my town, it's about St. Peter's and Via della Conciliazione. So it's like, wow. I have another question for you, and the point is, what is the reason why the underpassage didn't start before the Passetto di Borgo? That's a hard question, probably.
That's
sorry.
the questions. Yes, that's because it was impossible because of the structures of the Passetto di Borgo. So it was not possible to excavate under the, yes. And so the only we started just when they finished the basements, no, of the Passetto di Borgo.
Yeah, it makes sense. Yes, I understand. All right, let me read a few questions. There was somebody writing about the Holy Door of St. Peter's and if it in a way affected the design of the square or not.
Excuse me, I didn't.
It's se diciamo l'ingresso alla basilica in qualche modo ha avuto effetti sul design.
Not directly, but on the other hand, it's clear that the whole urban structure is somehow aligned with St. Peter's Basilica. So, I mean, it's such a huge landmark that for sure conditionates the whole design process. But one said so, I take advantage of this question just to say
yes,
another thing. And for example, there were quite interesting debates during the design phase with either council authorities and Vatican authorities. At a certain point, we were asked to refer greatly to, I mean, in a more direct way to St. Peter's and to Via della Conciliazione. And this is a suggestion we try to resist in the sense that, of course, we are not exactly inside Via della Conciliazione, and of course, we are relatively far from St. Peter. We are 500-600 meters far. And on the other hand, there were other stimuli in the area that had to be taken into account. So, I mean, getting too close to the forms of one part could have provoked, a cut in relationship to other elements that had also to be taken into account. Okay.
Okay, then there was another student interested in what was the most challenging difficulty from the engineering point of view, because this project is a lot about engineering, and you mentioned a number of challenges. What was the most important one?
Okay, as I told you, maybe the most difficult, the most important problem was that one of the collectors, but also the the walls, it was another problem for us. We made a hole just down just under the basement of the wall, because there is also a discharge in the river Tevere, and so we need to pass just here, more or less. No, just here, more or less, like this. And so we had to sustain all the structure to cross it. And also this structure, they are very, very close to the buildings. So the problem was to ensure that no problem at all, no settlements at all, nothing at all. So this was mainly the problems we encountered.
How long did it last, the construction site?
1.5 year.
Wow, that's a magic. In Rome, it's magic. You did a great job.
It's considered a record for us.
Yes,
Absolutely.
that's why I'm emphasizing it. For our students, probably it's kind of normal, but for Rome, it's really magic, a miracle, a miracle. Yeah,
not external design. The external design took
Yes,
longer,
took longer,
because
yes.
Many actors had to be involved.
Then there is a question about the architectural design. Somebody was asking if you look at other projects developed somewhere else in order to get inspirations for this one. And if the answer is no, it's fine.
Yeah, well, it's an interesting question, and it's related to what I was saying before. If you see this project, not because we are not interested in other people's project, we are very much interested, and at least in my opinion, when I see other people's project, I do like them more than the projects I do, and that's to see it somehow. But in this particular case, we established very rigid lines in which we were wanted to work, and therefore we look not that much to other design experiences, but rather to the existing urban forms of the city. I have to say also something. In working in the urban design realm, we worked with Professor Francesco Cellini, which has been Dean of the Faculty of Architecture of Roma III, one of Rome's faculties of architecture. So we engaged him as an expert, a deep quite an interesting person, and he is dealing in these days with the new piazza underneath the Augustus Mausoleum to the other side of the river. So for sure, that was an experience that also has to do with with considering changing levels and how to deal with slopes and this kind of stuff. So I mean that were our references, but no, I cannot say that we had any particular reference in contemporary architecture.
And then there was a pretty funny question by somebody else who asked about the project would have looked different if we were not in a Jubilee year. So how much pressure is given by the Jubilee?
I think that if each one of us can answer. In my opinion, if the Jubilee year have not taken places, the project simply have not been built. That's the point. I mean, the pressure that was around the project was all about the Jubilee year. And it is even amazing because that's the reason why either the design phase, the approval phase, maybe which we tend to forget in our project, that often the technical times are not the most important ones. there is an administrative time that has to do with obtaining all the approvals that often becomes the most critical part of the project. In this particular case, I don't want to say why, but I don't know why, but I can imagine everything went really smooth.
Well, I'm very surprised, especially by the archaeological superintendency, who was very quiet.
That's right.
They are usually the institutional body blocking any project in Rome because of any single piece coming from the past. So you were lucky they didn't complain much.
To be honest, I have to say that the conclusion we draw from this experience is that sometimes the only way to obtain things quickly is to work in terms of emergency. I mean, the work began very late, so it was a real chance to be able to finish all the project in the given time. And in that moment, from the normal process method, it became the emergency method, and that tend to smooth all the procedures without leaving nothing. I mean, the project is right with norms, with archaeological issues have been accomplished, but in a much more constructive way between the different stakeholders. Okay.
So somehow we should say thanks to the Jubilee.
Yes, of course.
And that's another question you didn't. I was thinking while you were talking, where the money comes from, because you spoke about a lot of money. It's entirely financed by the Italian government. Oh, that's also pretty a luxurious situation.
No money.
No. Vatican give only opinions, but not money.
That's funny. So strange. All right, guys. Is there anybody who's who has questions? They're available for you if you're curious about even how the studio works, and there's no silly questions. All the questions are very welcome. I know that you were probably not ready for this moment. But if you want, don't be shy. This is like a friend meeting. I'm very happy. I'm sorry, I gotta give you the microphone. Oh, no worries. It's just a mic.
How many projects were you working on while your firm was focusing on this one? Was this the main focus, all you guys were putting your time into?
All right.
Dozens of projects. We have dozens of projects at the same time to cope with. In 2023, the budget of this assignment is less than 10% of our budget in 2023 of this single assignment. Well, another project we had for the Jubilee is the one of Piazza della Repubblica. You may be passed in that place, in front of the planetarium, in front of Palazzo Massimo. So yes, we had to cope with other projects at the same time, many. But we are 70 people, not 60, but 70. And we're not enough, actually. Yes, this is true.
All right, thanks. Another question? Otherwise, I close this here because it's already 2. Yes. All right, so let me say thanks to all of you. It was really a pleasure to see you here. It was very nice to hear like the project explained from the different perspectives. I particularly appreciated the multidisciplinarity approach that you tried to explain our students. I'm sure this experience was really amazing also for our students, because they know the site. They walk, many of them, they walk every day passing through St. Peter's, and so I'm sure next time they will be like, oh yes, now I know the reason why this object is here. And so thanks again. Thank you guys for being here, all of you, the whole time. And that's it. I'm going to close this lecture here. Please remember that there will be 3 more lectures about the Jubilee in the next weeks. All right? Bye, everybody. Thanks again, Via Ingegneria.